Good afternoon, and welcome to the Future of the IC Workforce, Technology and Talent Transformation. Now, please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg.
Thank you, Allie, and good afternoon. I appreciate everyone joining us for the second installment of the INSA Foundation's 2024 Future of the IC Workforce, Technology and Talent Transformation series. The series is underwritten by GDIT and ClearanceJobs and is a two-part series that highlights the challenges and opportunities the IC faces in attracting and retaining a diverse and skilled workforce. Our first episode focused on increasing the representation of women and minorities in STEM careers and raising awareness of a variety of career paths within the IC. Discussions range from engaging high school guidance counselors to bringing in government and industry leaders to help students connect their academic interest with IC opportunities. If you missed it, I encourage you to visit the INSA and INSIF website to watch the recording. The episode is full of insightful ideas, many of which will be included in the series white paper set to be released later this year. Now, before we begin today's webinar, a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, and we hope you do, please submit them through the question box on the right side of the screen. Feel free to include both your name and your organization, but it's certainly not required. Our moderator will do her best to get to as many of your questions as possible. We are pleased to have members of the press on today's program. This is a reminder that the program is on the record and being recorded, and you will find the recording along with the recap on the website early next week. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator. A long-standing friend of INSA's and the INSA Foundation's, Lindy Kyzer is the Director of PR and Content at ClearanceJobs, the largest career site and online community dedicated to security cleared professionals. Lindy is a former Department of Army civilian and passionate advocate for improving the pathways into national security careers for both government and industry applicants. Lindy, I'm going to turn the program over to you now.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you to the Intelligence and National Security Foundation and to GDIT. Everyone knows I'm a big fan of this series because the future of the national security workforce is something that we are super passionate about at ClearanceJobs and myself in particular. So delighted to have today Kimberly King, Career Services Manager for Analysis at the Office of Human Resources, Directorate for Mission Services at DIA. You never get a better job title than a government job title. They catch me every time. So many words in one job title. Thank you, Kimberly, for joining us. And also the Honorable John Sherman, who has had to give up his government job title now and has moved on to Dean, the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M. Love the intersection of academia and government around this topic, and really excited to have both of you here today. So kind of wanted to start with a framing question. So taking the title of this webinar series, as we look ahead to the future of the intelligence community and national security workforce, what do you kind of see as the unique value proposition that national security careers brings? Kind of that intersection of technology. There's always the debate now, is technology still at the forefront in government? With technology, mission, and opportunity, why national security careers? Why pursue that path? I'll start with you, Kimberly.
Sure. So thanks for having me. I could probably talk on this question for many hours, being a longtime public servant. So I've been in the intelligence community for 25 years now, and the things that I love about working in the intelligence community are, first of all, the chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. You know, we attract a lot of officers who is a calling. You know, we want to serve our country. We want to serve the warfighter and the Defense Intelligence Agency. It's not about getting rich. It's not about glory. It's about being behind the scenes and just helping our nation stay safe. And so that mission is incredibly unique, incredibly rewarding. And as you said, you know, the technology is just driving us to new places, just compared to where I was 25 years ago. The chance to be part of a global mission. So for DIA, we've got over 16,000 officers, global organization. The government will PCS you, you know, if you want to go to Charlottesville, Virginia or Stuttgart, Germany, you get that move. And so I think it's a combination of the mission, the chance to drive your own career and travel the world, or you can stay in one location and become a really deep technical expert if that's what you want to do. And then the benefits. You know, we get great insurance and a thrift savings program, and the government actually lets us work out for 3 hours a week on government time. And so the stress on resiliency and physical fitness, as well as that, you know, that mental stimulation and serving your country. For me, there's just nothing more rewarding.
So same for you, Admiral Sherman, kind of talk through that unique value proposition that national security careers bring.
One of our main mantras here at the Bush School is public service is a noble calling. President George H.W. Bush said that. We have it written in several places in the school, and that's what's driven me personally, and I know all of my colleagues in the intelligence community. Kim hit on so many things about what it means to be in the intelligence community, the national and public service, defending our nation and our allies as we all work together. I'll add one other thing onto it too, being a trailblazer. We're going to be talking about technology, but I've had the privilege at multiple points in my career to be at the front end of technological changes, going all the way back to the stand-up of the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, later NGA, fusing together mapping and imagery, GIS together with overhead reconnaissance to create the new discipline of GeoInt under, at the time, Director Jim Clapper, later DNI. And then at CIA, at the Directorate of Digital Innovation, bringing together information technology, cyber, data, cyber operations, and so on to create an open source as well, to create a fusion of data, technology-driven intelligence for mission advantage. This is what we're about in the intelligence community, and that's what we try to imbue in the students here, to leverage this technology that's changing so quickly, because on your cell phone where you have Google Earth or whatever, Google Maps or whatever you're using, that started in the intelligence community, fusing together that mapping data and the imagery, and just think what else we're already leading in the IC. What a noble place to be and a place to lead it.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about competition between the private sector. That's always a hot topic around human capital. So what is the government doing to increase that value proposition to say, you talked about it a little bit, Kimberly, but when it comes to attracting the next generation who might not be like thinking about benefits out the gate, how do we get them to say, hey, national security is for you? What are some of those attraction strategies?
Sure. So I think, first of all, it's getting the right talent pipelines in place. So, we leverage IC centers of academic excellence, like Texas A&M for cybersecurity. We've got those all over the US, and developing those talent pipelines is really important because it gives us the connections to students early, who hopefully then we can get on board for internships, get them here for a summer, show them the kind of work that we do, because it's hard. The intelligence community can just look like a curtain, and we want to peel back that curtain and show them the reward that they'll get from working in the community. And so I think creating those pipelines, also just realizing where we do have challenges with the private sector. So one of the things that DIA did last year, really driven by USD INS, was a rollout of STEM pay. So we are just not competitive when it comes to STEM talent and looking at pay. And we probably never will fully close that gap, but if we really want to recruit and retain the top talent, we need to do better. And so we rolled out a new pay model for students who are coming from certain technical fields to fill STEM related positions, and we're able to increase the pay that they get. So that's been a really powerful recruiting tool. And then we just try to expose them to as much as we can through getting out to them. We'll bring what we call career development officers who can talk in depth about the different careers. We even, when we can, invite them in. So I just spent 5 years in Huntsville, Alabama at the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, and we tried to bring prospective students in, or prospective candidates in, once a quarter for open houses and show them what we could at the unclassified level. And nothing grabs you more, I think, than getting that little taste of here's what I could do on the job.
Yeah, no, I love that. We do a ton of candidate surveys, and it's always money, but it's mission. And those two are closer, they're tight. So I think what government can do to kind of decrease that margin, knowing you might not totally reduce it, but bringing that back there, and then also speaking to the value. So I wanted to talk about the value proposition with you, John, because I know you're on the front lines with students. What are kind of some of the things that you hear from students at the Bush schools? Because I know they're on that path to pursuing a government career. What are those values that are attracting them to pursue this path?
It really is the mission. It is the idea of being able to defend the nation against really a very broad array of threats that we face now, whether it's the rise of the PRC in the Western Pacific, what we're seeing with Iran and all their malicious activity, what North Korea is up to with their weapons program, and obviously what Russia's doing in Ukraine and elsewhere. And transnational threats continue to be a key issue. having that mission focus. And one thing we try to do to make it real, Kim laid out some really good things, what is going on currently in the intelligence community. Here at the Bush School, we have tenure track professors who are masters of scholarship and what they're doing, but we also have what we call professors of the practice. Folks like Greg Vogel, former head of the director of operations at CIA, Jim Olson, longtime DO officer, and many others here, men and women who are experts in their craft, whether it's in HUMINT, SIGINT, law enforcement, et cetera, giving tangible real world examples of what they did against going back to the Soviets or Al Qaeda, or what they did against North Korea and so on, and answering the students' questions and then telling them about what the pathway in an intelligence career looks like. And you had something important, salary's important. As we all move to the National Capital Region, I remember doing it 28 years ago with my wife, Liz, and we got to be mindful of that. But what's going to keep the folks there is the sense of mission and being part of something special, whether it's on a technology front or a mission takedown on something. And that's what I hear from the students is, and they are full of energy. And that's one thing being here at the Bush School has given me such motivation. Our future is in good hands. The women and men we're sending up to Kim and other intel agencies here, I'm proud of them, and we're in good hands.
Amazing. And I want to talk to you, Kimberly, about kind of attracting a technologically adept workforce and what that looks like. Government has all these technical requirements that they built in, right? And I know a common complaint, what we're always seeing is how do we keep pace with that? Especially when our labor categories sometimes look like they were framed, decades ago. So how do we evolve kind of what we're structuring when it comes to those labor categories, those job descriptions? Is that work that you've seen done at DIA or even other agencies to say, hey, how do we make sure the technical requirements are addressed in what we're actually advertising out for the positions that we need to fill?
So for us, most of the positions that we fill right now are at the entry level. And so we'll train people for whatever we need. And they come in so technically savvy. And John hit on this. I mean, the quality of new talent that we're getting is phenomenal. I mean, I don't know that I would be hired by DIA today, probably not. It's just, we've got more talent than we can possibly onboard. And they come in with such interesting backgrounds already, having done internships, having done cross-disciplinary programs, speaking a language, doing engineering plus math. I mean, it's phenomenal. And so then what we're doing is just kind of layering in what's missing, what they really need to get on the job. And so it's, in some ways you're almost focusing on those older individuals like myself who've been in the community and maybe aren't as AI literate as some of our newer officers. And so then you get into the upskilling, what is our, maybe older workforce missing that we need to add to their plate, and what kind of training do we need to provide? And so we focus on that pretty heavily as well.
Yeah, are there any specific examples of the upskilling and reskilling that are being done across the agency? Like what is that, is that continuing education, recertification?
Yeah, so for us, first of all, we're focused on the technology that we need to assess what skills we need to add in. And so we're kind of experimenting with technology to make sure that we get our arms around the skills that we do have in our workforce and what we need to add. In terms of how we introduce it, so tons of training. So we'll pay for technical training at universities. We have the National Intelligence University, which is the only classified intelligence graduate and undergraduate program in the nation. We send people to senior service schools. I got to go to the Naval War College for a year, which was a great opportunity. We do a lot of informal training. So we'll bring in great speakers through a series called Masterminds to talk about just a variety of topics. We have podcasts, we have a reading list. So it's really just about promoting that continual learning. And then some of the other formal training, we'll do things like micro badges. So in the Directorate for Analysis right now, we are focused on a China micro badge, a Russia micro badge, a technical micro badge, so that you can do that targeted training and get your badge. And then that either prepares you better for a job that you currently have or for one that you might want to take in the future.
Awesome. And John, can you speak to that a little bit? Kind of what are you looking at when it comes to the skills that you're trying to empower your students with? Are there you think there's technical gaps that you've seen? And this is a fantastic question for you because you've just seen it firsthand in government. So if you could build the workforce that you actually think you need to see within DoD or within the government, what kind of things are you trying to infuse in your student population now that you have that capacity and opportunity?
So an interdisciplinary approach is key for what we're doing here at the Bush School, and I think that would probably be consistent with some of our colleagues across academia here. But having multiple different types of classes, whether it's on intelligence and operations and law enforcement and regional studies, administration, and other things to create a well-rounded graduate student coming out here. And we also have undergrads now with the addition of the political science department a little over 2 years ago here at the Bush School. And again, those professors of practice are critical along with our tenure track faculty, and having real world experience about what they're going to be facing. The other thing I think we all benefit, Kim and I would both see, we do have a digital generation. We've talked about this now for quite a while, but a group of women and men who did grow up digitally, maybe in ways, I don't want to speak for you all, but definitely not when I was darkening the door here as an undergraduate at A&M, but in ways on dealing with not just cell phone technology, but as they deal with how they interact, how they communicate. And I think that's a major benefit as we bring them into the intelligence community. Yeah, they may need to learn about cloud-based technology or data standards that my friend Lori Wade is leading, and Marie Falkowski and others, but they've got it perhaps on a front foot advantage that maybe we wouldn't have had a number of years ago. So that's what I see, and also providing opportunities. So here at the Bush School, we're mainly focused not so much on the technical, but more on the interdisciplinary. But one thing I would say, we are working to up our bona fides a bit on areas like SIGINT and GeoInt, and having classes there. And also, we've always focused on cyber, but also cyber policy. And one thing one of our donors brought up I thought was very insightful, gentleman Michael Segura, class of 91, said, we got to have leaders who can translate between the all source, non-technical, not just all source, but folks who didn't grow up in that, and the technical sophisticates who are the implementers of that. And having men and women who can go in between those two worlds, I think will be key to our advantage in the IC.
I love that. I love that you keep bringing up the professors of practice. I say those individuals were critical in my career pathing, and I was a total nerd in college, but I totally took advantage of every office hours, every opportunity. I know we have a lot of university participation in these calls, and that's just something that I could commend to say, hey, reach out to those folks. They are they're going back to academia because they want to give back. So you asking them, making the ask, hey, how do I get your job, is exactly what they're there for. And there's a lot of great opportunities to do that. So you talk, Kimberly, and this is a common thread that we hear across the intelligence community. Like, we have tons of applications, right? We're getting plenty of applications for all of our positions. But the question always comes in, how are you able to diversify that application pool? So how are you ensuring you're getting not just, folks who know about this community because they've lived in it, but folks in the South, folks in, in underrepresented populations for what's working in the IC now? Does DIA have specific programs around that?
We do. So I think it starts with your recruiting plan. And so we do a ton of recruiting, and we have agency level recruiting. We partner with IC recruiting. We do our own career field. So, I represent the analysis career field. We'll do specific recruiting, but all of those plans, we want to get the right mix of diversity. So racial, ethnic, geographic, and then the talent and the skills that we need. And so we put that all together in our recruiting plan. And so, we've got the ICCAE pipeline as well. We look at events, so not just academic organizations, but organizations like Afrotech, the Society of Women Engineers, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. So organizations that also are going to have that diverse talent mix. And what we can do is we will issue an invitational vacancy announcement. And so if we are going to a targeted recruiting event or an event at a particular organization, what we might do is we will give them a specific invitational vacancy announcement. And that means it doesn't change the standards by which we're recruiting. We're still assessing everybody, but it can then give us a specific ID so that when we go to assess how we did with that event, we can see how many people applied, we can see how many people were hired, and again, just to give us that diverse workforce that we strive.
I love it. It's like these are technical problems, but sometimes there's technical solutions. We can bring a lot of data into it that we didn't have before, right? So like we we know more so we can do more. So I'd love to get your perspective, John, now that you're in academia too. How can academia help with that problem too, with that pipelining that Kimberly's brought about to bring kind of more diverse or different talent into the IC? Is that something that academia has a unique role to help with?
I think we do. As I've said often, for us to put the PRC back on their heels, we're going to need a workforce that looks like America, that taps into every bit of our talent. Now, here at the Bush School, for example, part of Texas A&M University, we not only serve the state of Texas, we want to be a destination of choice for folks going into national security. Have the only presidential school named after a president who served as CIA director, and we have our DC teaching site up on L Street too, where we have 110 students there. So our job is, my job is not only to reach out in the state of Texas, I want to bring folks in here and get them their graduate degrees in our intelligence program, national security, public service and administration, to be able to send them towards Kim there. And also for our undergraduates, our political science undergraduates. I just had one in my office here on Friday talking about getting her internship paperwork and digital applications in. So we definitely have a role in this, and our role too, I think, is to get them as broadly focused with the most exposure we can to create the very best talent. So when Kim and her colleagues at DIA and her counterparts at NGA and CIA, and go down the list here, have the very best pool of men and women to be able to, whether it's in foreign language, digital conversancy, regional knowledge, all of the above, that we're doing our job to prepare that pipeline. And we take this very seriously here, and that's what I see as one of my primary jobs.
I want to talk a little bit about retention, because that's always a hot topic in the intelligence community. We can attract these people, but can we actually retain them through a career? And especially that's where that technology piece comes in, because the private sector is going to be breathing down your throat saying, hey, come on. So how does the government sector really compete when it comes to retaining talent? And then maybe tying in a topic that was big for our last webinar, where we talking about the diversity and inclusion population, that sense of belonging, and how do you instill this notion of really belonging in this space? I'll probably ask both of you the question, but I'll start with you, Kimberly.
Sure. So there's a lot there. I think it starts from the day they come in the door, right? So, I mean, we talked a lot about mission, and that really is, I think, not only the number one thing that attracts talent, but retains talent. I mean, I set out 25 years ago to do what was just a job at the time, and it really very quickly became a calling and a passion, and I can't imagine doing anything else. And so that's really why most people stay. But along the way, we have people who do need to make sure that they're still getting paid what they think they need to support their family. And so that's when things like the STEM pay comes in. But you also mentioned just women, underrepresented communities. How do we make sure that everybody feels comfortable in the environment? That's something that we continually look at and assess. And I think that starts from day one as well, making sure that we provide sponsorship and mentorship. You mentioned the quantity of data that we have now. That's been really great for us to look at things like, are we advancing all segments of our workforce at similar rates? Are we, onboarding and have the diversity mix that we want? When we have attrition, who's leaving? Why are they leaving? We use data to look at all of those things and make sure that our attrition rates are, consistent with the private sector, or hopefully maybe less, and also that we don't have a particular demographic that's leaving. And so I think affinity groups are also really important. In the IC, there is a pretty wide variety, whether it's Blacks in government or the Asia Pacific American Council groups, that they bring each other along, but also can be important advocacy voices. So when things aren't working well, we have a group of champions who can help us find solutions to those challenges.
What I would add to that, yes, on everything there, I think, and this isn't for my friends at DIA here or anybody else, I won't name organizations, but if your career development feels like it's from the 1990s, probably is. And by that, I mean, there's career services and a lot of thoughtfulness being put across the agencies into this, but it still feels very government. And I think from a generation that is super creative, as we said, digital, if they're going to experience inflexibility, yes, they'll do the mission. They'll go to Islamabad. They'll go to West Africa. They'll work, for that mission support 12 hours or more into the night. But the highly laddered, structured, because we said so, and this is what you must do to get to, from pay band 4 to pay band 5 or GS 12 to 13 to 14, it can be suffocating. And this is one thing I want to really get on the record now that I'm not in the IC, and I was over at DOD for a while on this too. We've got to think differently. And if it feels bureaucratic, it is bureaucratic. Give them latitude. And I'll hearken to my own career experience, starting as an IA, ending up as a DOD CIO. All along the way, I had to swim against the tide on this. And I had great mentors and bosses like Sue Gordon and others that facilitated that. But more often than not, the mid-level was trying to hang on and not allow that. So if you feel like that's happening in your agency, that's going to kill retention as quick as anything. And you will lose them because they're so talented. They'll go to Google. They'll go to JP Morgan Chase. They'll go work at Dell or SpaceX or any number of other companies there. That's the one thing I would highlight.
Yeah, I love that. And we had a question come in about professional development opportunities. I know we've talked about it a little bit, and Kimberly, you mentioned that, but are there specific programs that are trying to get your mid-career, mid-tier professionals up to speed on technology? And I think the issue is too, you might even be in a non-technical field, but now technology is touching your work in ways that it didn't before. So kind of, are there strategies, thoughts, programs on getting those mid-career professionals where they need to be?
Sure, yeah, so can I actually just start? I want to just dovetail on what John just said, because I think it is an important point that, yes, we can kill our young officers with bureaucracy, and we talk a lot about empowerment and what that looks like, just how to be more flexible in how we develop. I do feel like, and I'm sure we're not perfect yet, but in my career in DIA, I know we spend a lot more time talking about development than we ever did in trying to have just more meaningful conversations about where people want to go in their careers and how we get them there. So segue into the question about how we do that. So we do formal things like joint duty assignments where we rotate, government to government. We try to embed people in academia, in private sector. At the senior level, we have sabbaticals. We use CRADA agreements, so cooperative research and development agreements with industry. It's a great way to expose people to new skills. And we always want to learn the best practices out there, whether they're government, whether they're industry, whether they're academia. And so doing those kinds of assignments, it helps us bring those skills back into DIA. And I will say, our current director, General Cruz, is a huge proponent of joint duty assignments, as I'm sure every director was before him. But having had the opportunity to do some myself, you really do just broaden in your thinking. And so we try to leverage those as much as we can.
And another great question came in, so I want to make sure I get to that. Can you talk about how leaders are being trained on managing this new distributed and hybrid workplace? Which we haven't even gotten to that question. Kind of how are we doing hybrid remote work? I know there's more of that within the IC. It's a new phenomenon, but are managers and leaders being trained to enable that workforce for success?
For me, yeah, actually, sadly, the pandemic was kind of a crash course in that for us, because it wasn't really a model that was all that common in the IC. We were used to just coming in and working in a skip every day. We did have geographically dispersed workforces, but suddenly we went into an environment where, for months at a time, as a leader in Huntsville, I could have only 25% of my workforce in the building on any given day. Now, you can't send everyone home because somebody's got to keep watching our adversaries, but we had to do it with a pretty small workforce. And so then suddenly trying to figure out how we kept everybody connected on a daily basis, we evolved pretty quickly on the unclassified side with just new tools and communication platforms. And so I think that conversation is still continuing from the pandemic. I think we learned a lot about what we could do at home and took some risks that maybe we hadn't taken previously. And we're trying to continue that. And I'm a great example of that because I'm in a position right now that would normally be done in Washington, D.C., and I'm able to do it in Charlottesville, Virginia versus via secure telework. And so we're also just trying to make sure that we maximize the flexibilities that we're able to give our officers.
And another question came in kind of related to the one I asked before too about STEM skills. Like, are there critical STEM skills that the national security workforce needs today that we really need to be training on? So AI comes to mind, but I'm still trying to figure out what AI is. John, maybe you can get me a class at Bush School or something. I need to go back. But like, when it comes to these technologies, is there like a framework or a path or a need even to build like an IC school of professional? You mentioned some of the schools that they have, Kimberly, but like, are there critical skills that we're just missing out on, that we're not getting infused into our workforce today, and opportunities there? I don't know who wants to take that one.
I'll start. John probably has a lot more to add from the academic side. I don't think anything's lacking. I think there are certainly some technical skills that we're just not seeing as many candidates as we would like. Electrical engineering, for one. That is unfortunately a specialization that we seem to be getting fewer candidates studying in. And so that is a challenge for us when you're looking, and when there's a small pool to begin with, and then there's a whole lot of us competing for electrical engineers, that's a challenge. Aerospace engineers. So certainly some of the engineering disciplines, there's just a lot of competition right now. AI, we're not necessarily looking for somebody to have a degree, although we of course are hiring data scientists. I think there's certainly a basic level of data literacy that we're just seeing in our newer officers in general. And so it's not necessarily something that we need to go out and recruit for that's lacking.
Almost like reverse mentorship, right? I feel like I need to be assigned a young person now. I frequently say that because I got my start with the Army doing social media management, and I'm like, please don't make me post to Snapchat. I'm too old for that now. So it's almost like I need a young person to teach me the marketing skills that I actually knew when I was 20 something. So I got another topic that's near and dear to my technological human capital heart. Like, are there game-changing technologies specific to recruitment? So Kimberly, is kind of on you, like that your recruiting team is using that they did not have before, right? I think I'm a big fan of the fact that we don't do the post and pray philosophy anymore. That's not how we attract talent. Like, is there technology that's being enabled across human capital to improve the way that you are able to do what you do?
Sure. I mean, sort of very basic level, obviously, we're able to touch a lot more organizations by virtual events. So we participate in a lot of virtual recruitment events, get our name out there as much as we can, save some trees by using QR codes, with our promotional materials. But really, it's the data piece. It's the tracking, making sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. And so if we, the recruitment plan that we talked about, every year we're going to want to sprinkle in a number of new schools and organizations that we haven't touched previously. So we have, at least in the analytic career field, a grow, build, sustain strategy. So, we've got our schools that are always probably going to be great feeder schools for us. There are the ones that maybe we're developing a relationship with. There's some that we're just touching for the first time. And so having the data about how many people came out and talked to us, how many of those people applied, of the ones who applied, how many ultimately onboarded. That's huge because, we've got limited recruiting dollars, and then that helps us know where we can best leverage those. When we go to a town, we want to make sure that we're hitting all the schools in a particular area. And we're using our alums as much as possible, our young officers. I know this isn't necessarily a technology question, but just I think it's a best practice to send those newer officers out, have them talk to the deans of their schools, the professors that they have great relationships with, and then let that be another talent pipeline for us as those people talk about DIA as a career.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about skills and competencies, which we've talked about throughout this webinar, but I want to hit it again. Like, are there critical skills and competencies? And they could be soft skills. And it's a lot about like, we need a multifaceted workforce, but are there specific hard or soft skills that you're both seeing from your advantage that would be really useful for the workforce to have? And I'll start with you, John.
Communication first and foremost. Whatever their topic is, could be technical, could be regional, some combination, to be able to write and brief clearly. And that's something we place a premium on here, and I know others do as well. is to be able to communicate articulately. It may start with briefings at CENTCOM or to their division chief or colleagues and end up eventually as a PDB briefer or in front of the Senate. But we see that as critical, and also an ability to synthesize complex data, make sense, and then convey it in actionable ways. That is something that I think we've all seen in the IC and elsewhere. Some people have had an easier path than others to get there, but that is something I think at the front end, at least in academia, I want to imbue in the students here, is with crisp, clear communication, starting, as I'm mentoring some folks, with the applications they're putting in. Bottom line up front, crisp language. Don't try to use too many 50-cent words just because you hear some in academia doing it. And already getting them in a mindset, you're writing for a decision maker. In this case, it could be a hiring manager. But I want to get them in that mindset so when they are in the IC, they've already thought about that. That's what biggie I would highlight.
Do you have other thoughts on that, Kimberly? Hard and soft skills that you're really looking for, that are really in demand right now?
So hard skills, obviously, China, Indo-Pacific region, regional expertise is very important to us right now. Russian regional expertise, cyber, programming skills. Linguists are always in demand, especially for less common languages. But we being a global organization, we still need police officers, and we need budget analysts, and we need contract specialists. And so, it's not all about the analysts. There are a lot of skills that we need in the organization, and a pretty diverse talent mix that we require. For soft skills, I'll second everything that John said, and I think also just the attributes that we hire for, critical thinking skills, but also professional humility, intellectual curiosity, teamwork. The IC can be kind of a strange place to enter. I think that's where universities can also help us prepare students for just, here's what to expect on day one. We try to get at that in recruiting, but it's still something where I think it's just an important conversation to have. You're not going to have your phone. You can't talk about what you do. It might feel a little bit lonely. If you're like me, you're going to think for your first year that you're going to just blurt out classified information in your sleep, because we drill that into your head, the importance of safeguarding secrets, obviously because it's critically important, but it can also feel a little bit scary. And so I think just working with students on how that's going to feel, and the fact that it's how you represent yourself and what your core values are that are as important, in my view, if not more, than the skills that you bring in.
And Vivian Wilson asks a great question about skills-based hiring. Harry Coker's new skills-based hiring initiative. Do you think that skills-based hiring can truly replace the need for a degree requirements for a lot of these positions? Can we replace, skills with certifications? I feel like this is an awkward question, John, since you work for college. We're still pro-college, but skills-based hiring, can both of you speak to that a little bit?
No, I think it absolutely, for a number of areas, particularly in technology, because I was talking about this as the DoD CIO, getting back into tapping in the full strength of the United States and all of our talent. How many folks do we have who have outstanding cyber programming, data skills they may have learned in the civilian side through maybe an associate's degree, definitely military experience, who are ready right now with more practical experience than somebody who may have gotten a degree. But I do need to add here in academia, not just because I'm sitting here at the Bush School, we need the combination of what they bring to the fight, along with folks getting undergraduate and graduate degrees in terms of everything Kim said, from languages, regional knowledge, in terms of communication skills. But I don't think one is to the detriment of the other. And I think this is where we unlock our full power as the United States. And this gets all the way back to what I was talking about on the getting rid of the 1990s view on things. We've got to be much more agile and nimble in how we come at talent, recruitment, retention, upskilling, and everything else we're going to do in there. If it feels like we're adhering to something that was appropriate 25 years ago, it's probably not appropriate right now. And I think that skill-based hiring is right in there. We're in a new era, and we better walk the walk on this.
Yeah, I love that. One of my favorite mantras is does that policy really exist? Or show me the reason for your no in government. I think coming from that background is just like, is there a reason we're doing this, and is it grounded in what the reality is today, or are we just doing it because we've been doing it this way for 20 years? So love posing that question. I think it applies to talent management, and that goes to something we talked about before, and I would love to get your perspective, Kimberly, since you're kind of relatively new to this position as career services manager, and you came from kind of that analytic background. Can you talk to kind of that transition? And then this is again one of those pie in the sky questions, which are my favorite to ask, and you just have to pretend I asked a question. Kind of the function of human capital as being a mission critical function versus just a support function, and knowing like how does that relate? Can you speak to that a little bit now, having transitioned from the tactical to this? Do you think that human capital in federal government is getting the attention it needs? Is it just seen as a support function?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I don't think it's getting the attention it needs. And I have really come to appreciate that in the last few weeks since taking on this position, because I was on the sort of the have side in the Directorate for Analysis for many, many years. And now I'm in HR realizing, oh gosh, these are heroic individuals who are doing, such amazing things every day and have such huge workloads and are really underappreciated and short-staffed. So how I came over, so DIA decided to create these 3 new career service manager positions last year. And it was really about, it kind of goes back to that talent management development piece, because you had talent management being done within our career fields. So the analysis career field or the security career field or IT, for example. And you had a career field manager who was trying to juggle all the demands of that particular mission area and develop the workforce. So recruit, retain, develop, place talent. And that's a lot to ask of anybody. And if you're the director for analysis and you're dealing with all of DIA's analytic production, that's a pretty big focus area. How much more bandwidth do you have then for the people? And so the agency decided to create these new positions, and it was a chance for me to broaden. I love analysis. I love managing analysis and managing analytic organizations, but it was a chance just to kind of see what life was like in another part of the agency, and the fact that I get to keep one foot in analysis because my job is specifically to manage the talent within the analytic career field. It was sort of the best of both worlds. I love mentoring. I love bringing on new talent. And so to be in that position where I'm responsible for the strategic recruitment and retention of our analytic career field, it's just really exciting. It's a chance to, take the perspective that I have from 25 years on the analytics side and bring that to the hiring side. And so all the questions that you've asked about, do we have the right skills mix? Where are we getting our talent from? What do we need to be thinking about for the future? How do we retain the folks that we have? Now I'm in those conversations every day, and it's really exciting.
And it's primarily for Kimberly because she's in the coveted government seat. But John, you were there pretty recently, so I'm still going to ask you, do you think the government, we see it talked about a lot, right? The human capital crisis and the need across the IC and DoD to attract and retain. Do you think that there is this broad understanding of how critical that function is across government? And are there any steps that you can even see? I think sometimes when you move to the outside, how do we move it to that mission critical function? How do we get the buy-in to say this is really important?
I think there's a definite understanding as we look at our IC leaders across the full gamut, whether it's General Cruz there at DIA or Admiral Whitworth at NGA or Chris Scalise over at NRO. I can go down the list there. Tim Hawk at NSA. I think they all absolutely, and their deputy directors and others get this. We have folks like Kim who come from the analytical side stepping into these key roles. DoD, I saw this at kind of macro level here. My concern is there's still a well-intentioned, patriotic, but somewhat frozen middle that do not move forward with the alacrity and vision that we're needing to get to the sort of talent acquisition, retention, upskilling that we're talking about in this digital, highly competitive age here. and there are still processes that need to be updated. One thing I'm seeing here at the Bush School are super qualified people that may have put in for an internship application, whatever, 3.8 and higher GPAs, don't hear a thing. It's just crickets. There's got to be, and I know some Fortune 50 companies aren't perfect with this, there's got to be some sort of thank you for your application, so-and-so. You are highly qualified, but we had enough of this X skill set, but we want you to apply next year. A human touch like that, but the system is not geared to that. And we're still in a 20th century kind of industrial type, quote, HR approach. And I mean this with the utmost respect to the hardworking folks in human resources. And I don't mean frozen middle as maybe as pejorative as sounding, but the leader's vision is going to have to translate all the way down, or the paradigm is not going to change enough in the time we need it to change.
Yeah, no, we talk about with that clearance process all the time. Like, we just need a pizza tracker. Like, I can tell when my Domino's order is coming in, but I don't know if it's anywhere between 6 months and 5 years for my security clearance, which is also a question that came up. Betsy asked if DIA has any programs to help with that onboarding process, because that is a common pain point, right? What do I do as I'm waiting for my clearance to come in, or what do we do with those conditional job offers? Are there any programs there?
Yeah, great question. And I agree with John. We are not where we should be or where we need to be in terms of the technology and the processes to quickly hire on board. And in fact, I should have offered this as a second part to my previous answer with the underappreciated. We do have a major investment right now in OHR modernization program where we are trying to bring our HR technology into the 21st century. And be able to just better track candidates throughout the entire process and have those communications with them. I mean, we still have communications with all the folks in our pipeline, but it really depends on a particular hiring manager reaching out and contacting them. We don't do the automatic notifications as well as we should that you alluded to, John. So we need to get better there, but I do think there is complete buy-in for getting there within DIA, and so it's probably a 10-year project that we're working on right now to really get where we want to be. And we're just in year one. But again, the fact that it was a major investment, the fact that my position nests within OHR as well as all these other career service managers to build those bridges between the OHR senior level and the career fields, those are all steps in the right direction. In terms of what folks can do when they're in the pipeline, we talk about that. There are some process changes that would need to happen. Unfortunately, a lot of our workspaces, we don't have that kind of flexibility to just bring in, folks who maybe only have a secret clearance. I actually started my career in a skiff with only a secret clearance, and it is a sad place to be when you are that person and the red light is always going off because of you and you have to be escorted to the bathroom. It's not fun for anyone. So we need more flexible workspaces to be able to bring in people with secret clearances, put them to work. We talk about it. We're not where we need to be, but that is what we want, I think, ultimately, in my view, to be able to do, because we leave them hanging out there for so long. And whether it's 6 months, 12 months, people don't necessarily have that flexibility. And so we lose more candidates than we want just from that pipeline after we've recruited them, after we've started processing them for their clearances. And so we really need to just figure out better how to get them in seats as quickly as possible.
Yeah, my claim to fame is I worked in the Pentagon under a public trust, but I thought I had a secret clearance for about 8 months till somebody realized it and then took me in. That's how I got my job with ClearanceJobs, because I had my first clearance so screwed up that I learned better, and now I know better, and now I do better. So a question came in for you, John, about how can academia better build those pipelines that we've kind of been talking about? Are there any barriers to, and I think that's something that comes in, you obviously have that experience having come from government, but are there better ways to create those pipelines so that academia knows what it needs to do to build out that workforce?
I think communication is critical, and also having an open door to recruitment teams, which we've done here just in the couple months I've been here. I've seen a couple agencies already down here meeting with our students, mainly graduate students, some undergrads as well, and even CIA was here doing a couple days of scenario-based orientations, both for clandestine operations as well as analysis. And I really appreciated that, to be able to, the students showing up dressed in business attire, leaning in as they would if they were showing up at Langley to work in the DA or DO. I think you've got to have that. Communication is key. And frankly, for folks like doing what I'm doing as in a dean or leadership role, being able to make sure we're making clear to our colleagues in the IC that we're open for business here, and we're specifically focusing our instruction, whether it's at our DC site, like where Linda Wisegold is a professor of the practice, or down here in College Station, getting students ready to, with clear-eyed understanding of what they're getting into. To Kim's point a few questions ago about, turn off, tell them to stop watching movies and whatever, and here's what a case officer really does, here's what an analyst really does, here's what someone in science technology really does. I think that's critical to having our bona fides strong with the intelligence agencies who are going to be accepting the folks we're sending their way.
Okay, and we're getting towards the end of our time, so I'm going to queue up my last question, which means if there's anything I didn't ask you about and you just wanted time for a monologue, now is your chance. So just my final question is just kind of talk about, we've been talking about, the whole focus is the future of the workforce, tools, technology, techniques, but also how do we keep the core values that are critical to the IC? Because that's what I see throughout the whole thread and everything both of you are talking about. Like, we have this mission that is the same one we've had, since America was founded, this unique value proposition. How do we combine that value with these better tools, techniques, and practices? Pretend that was a question. I'll start with you, Kimberly.
So the first thing that comes to mind is just empowerment. So how do we empower our officers? Because you want them to come in, again, with those critical thinking skills. You want them to be innovative. You want them to push boundaries. You don't want them to feel boxed in, but it is a bureaucracy, and we do have standards for things like how we can employ AIML and open source information. And so how do you give them the freedom to operate as effectively as they can within that space? I think that's what we strive for. And so in my last organization at MISIC, we had an innovation board that we ran like a Shark Tank. And we basically said, hey, if anybody's got a good idea, whether it's a process that needs to be fixed or a policy that's dumb or a capability that we need, bring it to us. Because John talked about that middle management earlier. I've been a middle manager, and so it's not a bad word, but sometimes innovation can die on its way up to the decision makers. And so what we wanted was that unfiltered, hey, just come pitch us your idea, and we can on the spot say, yep, let's do it. And then you, junior officer with a great idea, you become that idea champion, and you take it as far as you can go, and we'll just be there to help you when you get stuck. And so what I loved about that was it did give them the freedom to operate within that space and push boundaries that maybe we didn't even know about, because we don't see things from their level. And somebody told me once, the question that I love to foster innovation is, what's stupid about your job? I love to ask people that. Just tell me what's stupid about your job, because I don't necessarily know the same challenges that you're experiencing, and maybe we can partner on those together. And so I think that's just the space that we need to continue to operate in, is how do we best empower our junior officers who come in, again, just so data literate and with such great skills, and we don't want them to be deflated by a bureaucracy. We want them to help us figure out where we've got barriers to be the best that we can be.
And I would say it's very similar to what I'm doing here in academia. You remain true to your core values. Core values in the IC are mission, fidelity, getting things done. Here at Texas A&M, it's respect, excellence, leadership, loyalty, integrity, and selfless service. Those are our core values. And when President George H.W. Bush established this school in 1997, those core values were central: selfless service, being humble, but also being ready to evolve. And we've evolved, and this is exactly what's going on in the IC. I talked about being part of the NEMA NGA stand-up, the Directorate of Digital Innovation, and encouraging that here in academia. For example, as we've stood up an intelligence studies program, we've added political science to our existing our graduate studies here. And I tell the students and the faculty, by the way, that that the experience I've had in the IC, where you may be a little skeptical of change at first, but then it becomes indispensable. GeoInt is indispensable. I think my colleagues at DIA would even say that. I want what we're doing here at the Bush School to be indispensable, but in ways we may not even envision it. And I think that's the challenge for IC leaders going forward, is they've got to set that vision. As Jack Kennedy would have said, throw that hat over the wall, go get it, and then show people what you can do. So that's what I would say.
Great. Well, thank you, John and Kim and Lindy, for doing such a wonderful job facilitating the conversation and for sharing your insights with us today. I, for one, learned a great deal. Once again, a shout out to GDIT for underwriting the series. And for all of you all watching online, thank you for joining us. When the webinar ends, take just a couple of moments and fill out a brief survey that pops up. And this concludes today's program. I hope everyone has a wonderful remainder of your afternoon.